Hello, Garland Nixon here, and that's been a question for centuries. Why is it? Why are some countries rich? Why are some countries poor? I have my suspicions as to why, and I think Europe's about to find out. Let's talk. Hello, I've been talking about Europe a lot lately, but I think it's a subject that needs to be addressed. I think we are living in a very interesting time, and it's something that needs to be discussed while it's going on, and certainly it will be discussed long after. And the time that I'm talking about is, of course, as you probably know if you're watching this, the Ukrainian conflict has been the reaction by the West have been massive sanctions against Russia. The sanctions seem to be backfiring on the West, and the West in particularly. I mean, and in particular, the EU are facing some pretty dramatic economic pain, and it is incalculable the damage that the leaders of the EU are doing to their respective countries. And of course, the discussion is, why are they doing this? This doesn't make sense. I'm just going over a few things that we've talked about in prior shows. And it doesn't make sense. Why would a country act in a way that was not in the best interest of its citizens? Why would a person in a democracy act in a way that was not in the best interest of its constituents? And forgive me if you've heard this before, but I will make the statement that I've made many, many times about the EU and its democracy. After World War II, there was an unwritten agreement. The Soviet Union would get power over Eastern Europe. It would not pretend that there was a democracy. It would make it clear, this is at my country. We own it. They got to do what we say. It was pretty straightforward and honest. They took Eastern Europe. They kept Eastern Europe. And the Russians basically said, the Soviet Union at that time, that people have attacked us, and they've always gone through Eastern Europe. Not again. We're going to keep most of Eastern Europe. Okay. What happened in the West was something interesting, in that the U.S. kind of made the same deal. They said, then we're going to you take Eastern Europe, Western Europe is ours. We own Western Europe. It's ours. We'll put bases there. We'll do anything we want. They'll have to do what we say. It will be like an extension of the United States. But they had a problem. And that was that the Europeans probably wouldn't buy into that. So what they did was, the deal really was made with the ruling elite class. And that is that they would create the illusion of social democracies, the illusion of democracy in Western Europe, and the US would maintain hegemony over what appeared to be a democracy. They would let the people think that there was a democracy. They would even, to some extent, let the people vote, let the people put some leaders in, things of that nature, but they would ensure that the leaders that were given as options, as in general, would be those who would be compliant to their masters in Washington. That's the history. That's how we got where we are today. All right. So what we have is, why are some the question, why, at the foundation of what we're discussing tonight is a question: why are some countries poor? Why are some countries rich? I'll say this. I used to teach, when I taught about crime in criminal justice courses, and I'd say, why is there crime? Well, there are all kinds of theory as to why there's crime. But what I ended up saying was, there are as many reasons as there are crimes. There's a lot of different reasons why people move into a life of crime, or even a temporary life of crime. Sometimes it's out of desperation. Sometimes you have people who are sociopaths and have mental disorders. Sometimes you have people who are just very, very selfish and don't give a shit, and they want something. There's just so many reasons. People, the way they grew up, the modeling they had was bad. There's so many reasons. Enough, but yes, I've always said, as many reasons as there are crimes. So there are a lot of reasons why countries are poor. But while there are various reasons, why do countries stay poor when they have abundance? Why do we see that so many countries, particularly in the global South, are rich with resources, but they don't have any money? You have countries such as Nigeria loaded with oil, and what happens? The oil goes out the door. The top 1% are rich beyond belief, and the rest of them getting other 99% gets nothing. So you have corruption, dramatic amount of corruption, things of that nature. But again, let's make a separation if we're going to say why some countries are rich and why some countries are poor. Before the Industrial Revolution, when everything was about a couple of things, it was agriculture. And of course, it was a lot of plundering and looting going on around, as countries, oftentimes empires, would go around the world, find smaller countries or city states, invade them, and take their gold or whatever the heck they needed, kill their men, use their women and sell their women and children into slavery, things of that nature, right? So that was prior to the Industrial Revolution, if we want to call that. But one of the Industrial Revolution created some new things in leading into the Industrial Revolution. Because remember, slavery, how did we get slavery in the United States for cotton? It was preceded by slavery in the slavery in the Caribbean for sugarcane. So that came, and believe it or not, there's a great book called Empire of Cotton. I might have it right there somewhere. I don't know. I got it somewhere. But there's a book called Empire of Cotton. I don't know where it is. But at any rate, it talks about it, how basically the whole U.S. slave trade was started on money, with money, seed money from the sugarcane slavery in the Caribbean, right? So you had some big agro, let's call them big agro precursors to the Industrial Revolution. And again, some of the money from the big agricultural was used as seed money, which would be the cotton and things of that nature, tobacco, things that they use slaves. Basically use slaves for this big agro. And then they took that money and then they started building factories, and you got into the Industrial Revolution. And of course, they needed stuff. You got they need rubber, they need raw materials. So rather than go to these countries and give a fair deal or whatever, they overthrew countries, they enslaved people, they slaughtered people, and they took their goods. So during the Industrial Revolution, a lot of countries that were building industry were growing, but the way they were acquiring the goods for industry, the raw materials, was through brutalizing people in lesser developed countries and stealing their stuff. So that became a pattern during the Industrial Revolution to this day hasn't changed. I mean, look up the history of the United Fruit Company, which is what, Chiquita or Dole. Look up the history of Coca-Cola, what they've done as far as cacao and chocolate. Look at the history. I mean, we go on and on, diamonds and you name it, rubber in Belgium, on and on and on, and you'll see the same thing, right? So as the Industrial Revolution came, what you started seeing was countries were poor, they had resources. And if someone's willing to give them a fair deal on the resources rather than slaughter them and steal their resources, they wouldn't have been poor. So the poverty of countries became not just a decision. It wasn't just that the wealthier country had the bigger army, had the guns, had all of that, made a decision to come in and keep this country poor. It's because they actually used what we would call today armed robbery, what we would call mafia type tactics, to go into a country to steal their stuff, maybe have a few compliant puppets in there, etc. And then they would oftentimes they would simply colonialize, take over the country, steal their resources. And once the country became unmanageable and fought for their freedom or whatever, when they gave them ostensible independence, right, the former colonial masters would still put the people in power who was in charge of everything, so they could still steal their stuff, and they keep those people rich and everything else would be poor. And that's what we're looking at in big parts of the global South today. But bit by bit, these countries are starting to kick out the US and the colonial empires from Europe. And if we're honest about it, if we are really honest about it, some people might not like it. It has to do with Russia, the rise of Russia and China, Iran, some of these other countries, even to some extent Turkey, who can be a backstabber. But these countries who now can present an alternative option to Mali. Mali now says, get out, French. We like the Russians and the Chinese, right? So now you have South America, that they're all, China's their number one trading partner, right? So now you have alternatives for these countries that were just really being abused and kept poor. They look, Africa wasn't poor. If Africa was poor, the West wouldn't be all over Africa. Africa is a very rich country. They, in the same way that if I walk out of the bank with $1 million and somebody hits me over the head and takes it, I don't have $1 million. They do, but it's not because I'm poor. It's because I've been robbed. That's my view of Africa, of the so-called developing nations. Developing nations was the U.S. and its vassals, its empire. Their job was to keep them. They felt that their job was to keep them from developing. Right. And so now one of the reasons that the U.S. is so angry at Russia and China is because they are presenting another option. They won't play the game, and they do feel that they have the right to present alternative options and to compete with the United States on a world stage economically. They actually feel like they have a right to compete with the U.S. That if the U.S. says, I want contracts in this country, that they got a right to come in and say, we'll undercut you and we'll give you a better deal. And they will do that. And needless to say, that country now wants to take a deal with Russia and China. Russia and China feel like they have a right to do that. In the past, nobody would do that because the U.S. gangster nation would just kill you. They can't do that with Russia and China because they're too powerful. And to some extent, Iran, who is aligned very strongly with Russia and China. So here's my whole point. When you got to the Industrial Revolution, the reason that some countries are poor to a large extent has to do with greed, has to do with colonial powers, colonializing them, taking their stuff. And then even after they fought for independence, still maintaining puppets. And to this day, you look at so many countries that are wealthy around the world in the global South with so much stuff. And the U.S. and its allies simply keep puppets in there, overthrow the governments, put in another puppet, keep chaos going in the area, and just keep stealing their stuff. Right? So they are poor. A country is poor because of corruption. A country is poor because of greed, and because there is a hegemonic force. There's a powerful country that's much more powerful than them that is willing to sacrifice the living standards and the lives of that country's people so that they can get what they need, so they can get their own personal policies executed. Right? Here's my point. So yeah, okay, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, you name it, country after country we can name in Africa and in South America, or that the U.S. just has malice towards, like Cuba. So the U.S. and its allies will do all this to hurt these countries and to oftentimes take their stuff, right? But now my point is, I think Europe's going to learn that lesson because, and this is interesting, Europe, for centuries now, right? I mean, go centuries. Europe was, the Brits were colonial masters over, look at the size of India. They were colonial masters over India. They were colonial masters over large parts of China. They had Hong Kong. I mean, all around the world, Middle East and Africa, you name it. They had areas that they were in control of, right? All over the place. And they were using that power to get natural resources, to rule the seas and the shipping lanes and things of that nature and do whatever they wanted. Well, now, unfortunately for them, the shoe's on the other foot, because now you have a hegemonic force, which is the United States, right? Which is a formal hegemonic force, which is the most dangerous kind. A country, the United States is an empire that for the last 20 years or so, from say 1990 to say 2017, was the singular power, major power in the world. But now Russia and China have actually risen to be major powers. And now the US sees Europe as a tool. Generally, Europe works with the US and they use global South countries as their tool. Well, now the US comes in. One tool is Ukraine. Here's a tool. They're like, we're going to use Ukraine to bump as a blunt object to beat Russia with. And anybody who disputes that, oh no, I don't think so. What happens if you look at Ukraine through the lens of Taiwan and you say, well, wait a minute, is it just a coincidence that the U.S. is in the country that's on the border of Russia? They're pumping weapons into them. They're saying they've got to be independent and sovereign. They're putting all this money and time and everything and all their resources into this country on the border of Russia to be acting in malicious ways towards Russia. At the same time, they're doing the exact same thing to Taiwan on the border of China. If you look at it like that, if you look at them one or the other, you discuss one or the other. But if you put them together, you're like, as I always say, there are like three world powers: Russia, China, and the United States. And the United States has is pumping weapons into the border country of both Russia and China. They've got missiles on these islands all around China. In fact, there was a State Department who referred to those missiles as a noose that they have around China. They are the United States government is threatening with malice and a forethought, threatening China. You don't see China putting missiles on islands all around the United States, but the U.S. is encircling the United States. So the United States encircles China with bases, encircles China with missiles, and then says China's a threat to us. That's preposterous. You got to be really stupid to believe that, or just want to believe it because you're a brainwashed cult member. That'll work too. If you're a brainwashed cult member, you can believe it. So that works. But the bottom line is, my whole point about when it gets back to the issue of countries being impoverished, why are countries impoverished? The U.S. is going to find, I mean, the EU, the UK is going to find out that during the Industrial Revolution, and one could call this a post-Western Industrial Revolution, because the West moved its industry all to China. The Western oligarchs realized that labor was a high cost in the West, that the standard of living in the West was a little too high, which meant that labor cost was high. So they moved it all to China, where the standard of living at that time was lower and labor cost was lower. And what China did was, as all of these things were moved there, all of these factories, they learned how to make things. They learned all the technology for industry, and they built their own industry. And they did a pretty damn good job of it. And they're competing with the United States, and the United States is going after them. So what I'm saying is this: now, in the same way that Europe and the US have made decision after decision, which has impoverished global South countries, the US has now, because it feels threatened, because it has an economic problem, the US now has made a decision to impoverish the EU. The bottom line is this: do I know exactly why? I don't know. But I do know, I mean, I don't know. I can see it. You can see it. That is an outcome that you can see. You can see the policies of the United States. You can look at Europe. You can actually see the numbers falling as Europe gets poorer and poorer and poorer. You can see the projections. Come on. Fuel going up by 80%. I saw a picture. This was on all over Twitter. And there was a woman who owned a pub in like Scotland or Ireland, God only knows where, one of those places that has leprechauns or something. And her bill was 9,000. Basically, you might as well say just going on $10,000, 10,000 bucks for 2 months. 2 months. Which means that the pub will have to close down. What the U.S. has decided is, look, the prices are going to go high in Europe. We don't care because we're going after Russia. And those prices are going to be passed directly to the consumer. And that is going to create economic destruction in Europe. Economic destruction. I mean, this is not creating a temporary bubble in Germany. They ain't going to get a bubble in Germany. They don't get a chance to get a bubble. They're not going to get some discomfort for a few years. I read somewhere where some guy from Austria or something, some economic minister or something, said there will be 5 to 10. There'll be a decade of bad winters. Really? A decade? And what's going to happen on the 11th year? So what he's basically saying is, hey, for the next 10 years, we're going to be impoverished and your ass is grass. But keep in mind something. After that 10th year, a miracle is going to happen. What it is, I don't know. How? I don't know. I get no clue, nothing. I'm just telling you, for the next 10 years, your ass is grass and poverty is the lawnmower. But after that 10th year, so he's made a prediction that for the next 10 years, Europe's going to have impoverished winters. Well, here's my thoughts. I mean, I'm going to throw this out there to you. Maybe I'm wrong. When I was born, I was poor. Very poor when I was born. Luckily for me, I didn't stay poor my whole life, but I was poor when I was born. And as I recall, and I was a young lad then, quite young lad, we were poor in the winter and the summer. We weren't poor in the winter, and then all of a sudden, hey, look at that, it's 70 degrees. Money's falling out of the sky. Yes, sirree, let's go buy a brand new Cadillac. Get out of here. No. Oh, yeah, there's going to be some tough winters for the next 10 years. This is what the Austrian or Belgian, one of those, who cares? All I know is it is some energy minister from some godforsaken hellhole, which is what all of Europe is going to be in Europe, saying we're screwed for 10 years. In the winter only, because hey, in the summers everything will be fine. I mean, hey, you won't have, I just hope it doesn't get it too hot because you won't have electricity. Hope you don't get hungry because food's going to be a little hard to cook when you're burning your furniture, things of that nature. But other than that, in the winters you're going to be bad now. Winter, you ain't going to be happy. But in the unlikely event that you live, and let's just say all of your toes don't fall off from, let's say you got 8 toes. Let's say you only lose 2. It's a good winter. Then you only got 9 more winters, and then that'll be over. Now, why it'll be over after 10, I don't know. Just to pick the number, you pulled it right out of his ass. Why? 10 years, and we're good. Well, the bad news for the whatever energy minister of whatever godforsaken hellhole in Europe who predicted 10 years of bad winters, you're going to have bad summers, bad springs, and bad autumns. And here's the problem. That ain't the way it works. You're talking about a depression or a recession, which is based on bubbles and cycles and things of that nature, which I don't agree with any of that stuff either. I do things differently. But here's my point. This ain't going to be bubbles, and it ain't going to be cycles. It's called deindustrialization. You see what's going to happen in Europe. It's these gigantic companies, BASF, Mercedes, Siemens, Bosch, on and on and on. When you're paying 10 times the amount that you are accustomed to paying, for fuel, for energy, that means you can't be competitive. I've read somewhere that right now, German companies are paying anywhere from 5 to 8 times more for energy than American companies. So if you're making a refrigerator in there, and think about this. Meanwhile, China's getting theirs at a discount because Russia's selling it to them for a cheap price, like 30% off or something, $30 a barrel off, something like that. So they're doing pretty good in China. They're going to be able to make their goods at a reasonable price. Anything that the U.S. makes or sells is a reasonable price. Europe, you're screwed to high heaven. So the Europe is going to be scrambling to get enough energy to just barely keep from all of their citizens freezing to death, to keep their electricity on. I mean, we're talking, if this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they're on the bottom floor, my friend. They are pushing for basically food and shelter. That's that. If you're in Europe, food and shelter, those are the 2 words you want to think about. Those are going to be the things of consequence, food and shelter. Anything after that, I fear, is going to be a bonus. So what's going to happen? What we're seeing is now, after centuries of saying the countries in the global south are poorer because they are lesser intellect, of lesser work order, lesser work ethic. They are just inferior creatures. And then other people were saying, yeah, but you're stealing their shit, and you're like massacring them and things of that nature. Could that be why they're poor? No, it is simply because they are intellectually and morally, ethically inferior to us. Europe's going to find out the answer to that now. Yeah, the question is going to be this. Here's my question, Europe. As you fall into dire poverty, are you morally or intellectually inferior to me? I live in Maryland. Are you morally and intellectually and inferior to people in, I don't know, Russia? Because they're going to be doing a lot better than you. By that old argument, that's going to mean that the Russians have a better work ethic than the people in, say, the UK or Germany, because they're going to be impoverished in the UK and Germany. They'll be a poor country. And in the looks of Russia, they ain't going to be a poor country because they're making more money than they ever did selling oil. And guess what? Not only that, the rich get richer. They're grabbing all of Ukraine, where the port cities, the steel making industry, big areas that makes gigantic steel plants, gigantic industrial areas. So they're and this gigantic wheat fields. So as if Russia didn't have enough natural resources, now they're going to have all the. I've heard up to 85% of the valuable natural resources and areas of Ukraine. 80% of their GDP is what Russia's going to end up with. And you know what? What? How about this? The only people in the world who are holding to these sanctions are like the U.S. and its vassals. The rest of the world ain't. So the U.S. is, excuse me. So Russia's going to have no trouble selling their stuff. They don't need us. And at some point, they're cutting the tap completely. Look at this. Look at this. You think Russia's screwing around? Let's look at this. Russia cuts off gas supply to French energy company. Gazprom has announced it will halt supplies to Engie, following the French company's failure to pay for gas deliveries in July. Gazprom confirmed on Tuesday it had cut off gas supplies to French utilities company Engie. The Paris-based firm has failed to pay for July gas deliveries in full. Gazprom said it would cease gas delivery starting September 1st until the moment it gets the payment for the already supplied gas in full, the energy giant said in a statement, and also noted that the French side had failed to make the payment by Tuesday evening, even in making any further gas deliveries impossible under Russian law. Earlier in the day, Engie warned that Gazprom had informed it of a reduction in gas deliveries and cited a disagreement between the parties on the application of some contracts, according to Bloomberg. It did not provide any details about the nature of the disagreement. Look, can we be clear about this? I think we all know the nature of the disagreement. Look, France accuses Russia of using gas as a weapon. Oh, really? You think? And so here's what you got. Let me see if I can find this. French energy minister, economic war on Russia. Let me see if I can find this. Look at this from March 1st. French minister declares economic war on Russia. Look at this. Oh, you can't see it. French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire declared an all-out economic and financial war against Russia to bring down its economy as punishment for invading Ukraine, right? Okay. Oh, Ricky, that's fine. That's fine. No problem. So, think about these things. When France says Russia's using energy as a weapon, you said that you had an all-out economic war on them. Can you imagine that? What are you going to do? Let's see. Let me pick a name here. Somebody that I know. I don't know anybody here. Well, I know everybody here. I love you all. Let's just say, for example, Kinky. Let's just say I was to say I'm going to punch Kinky in the face, and I swung at Kinky, and then Kinky punched me in the face, and I said, "Hey, what's wrong with Kinky? You're crazy. You're going around there punching people." I swung first. I got to swing at Kinky, and I don't expect Kinky to swing back at me. That doesn't make much sense, does it? That's not logical and reasonable. The idea that I can beat the crap out of you and you're not going to try in any way to defend yourself. So here's what I have to say. Is Russia using energy for a weapon? I think, let's be honest, I think they probably are. And let's be honest again. I think when the French energy minister said, we are declaring all out economic war on Russia, here's the way Russia interpreted that. They're declaring all out economic war on Russia. That's the way Russia interpreted when you said we're declaring all out economic war on Russia. And therefore, if you take a shot economically at someone else, they're going to shoot back. So you're like, we're going to cut and we're going to seize hundreds of millions of dollars from Russia. And in my opinion, although Russia's smarter than me, because when that happened, if I was Russia, I would have said, look, I think we're going to cut you off. You're not getting anything from us till you give us our money back. But we need gas. Yeah, you sure do, don't you? Shame you don't have any. Well, call us if you want to give us our money back and we'll cut your gas on. Other than that, you're off. You ain't coming back on. It's done. If I'm Russia, but Russia's smarter than me. The people that run Russia are smarter than me. And you know what they did? They said, okay, you idiots, you want to buy gas? We'll sell it to you just enough to keep the fish on the hook. They got just enough bait on the hook to keep the fish wiggling. So they give just enough that the EU can barely make it, but that the price is astronomical. Because if they give them more, the price will go down. So they give just a little bit, the price stays through the roof. So Russia ends up making more money now than it did before the sanctions, because even though they're selling considerably less gas, now they're selling it to everybody else in the world, but they're making way more for the gas. They're making 5 times the price. So who the hell cares? You can sell 20% of what you used to sell and make the same money, but they're selling more than 20% and they're making more. So they win. So my point is, that being said, all of this is going on. It is impoverishing the EU countries. And it's not like we woke up one day and something happened. The market crashed. Somebody blew up all of the industry in Europe. A cyber crime shut everything down. No, 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 no. These were decisions that were made in Washington, D.C., in Foggy Bottom at the State Department, in White House, in Langley. The decisions that were made in and around Washington, D.C. were I'm not going to say intentionally done to impoverish Europe, though I'm not ruling it out. At the very minimum, they were done with a reckless disregard for the lives of Europeans. And that's with no malice. That's if I don't include that there was some intent and there was mens rea, there was a criminal state of mind. If I don't add a criminal state of mind, if I just said, well, they wanted to get out to get Europe, then there was a reckless disregard for human life. And those are the lives and the living standards of the people in Europe. So now here's my question. As their living standards fall, you're going to see their living standards fall down to the level and below some of the countries in the so-called developing world. You will literally see the UK and Germany probably first. And might I add, the thing about Germany is this. Germany is either 25 or 40% of it's like 25%, I think, of the EU's industrial power and economic power. It's huge. But at the rate we're going, based on the decisions made by the U.S. empire that the German government is following, it will be deindustrialized. The industries in Germany will be forced to relocate out of Germany. What do you want to bet? Some of them move to the U.S. But even then, it ain't going to be cheap because it's be expensive. They'll move to like China, literally. Okay. But so what's going to happen is these are all jobs. And due to the price of energy, the countries will not be able to be competitive. And again, the same goes for, there's a lot of industry in Italy. They make cars, lots of different kind of cars. France has Renault, but Italy makes all kind of cars, luxury goods, items, you name it, right? Well, that stuff's going to be real expensive to make. And the prices are going to be real jacked up on that stuff. And then, of course, you got France. They got all kinds of stuff, everything from wine to, cheese to all kind of cool French stuff, right? A lot of these countries that have things that they sell. The problem is that the price of energy is going to be so high that they won't be able to be competitive on the world market. And you deindustrialize the entire Europe. Why? And when you deindustrialize it, as those industry closes, those are people's jobs, which means what? Which means that Europe will be impoverished as a result of political decisions. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not the people are productive, whether or not they mean the best, whether they want the best for their families, whatever the case. The best they're going to get is propaganda. The people in Europe are going to get a bunch of propaganda to tell them why they're doing the right thing, why they got to keep supporting Ukraine no matter what, blah, blah, blah. And they're going to wake up one day and say, what the hell happened? We don't have jobs. Our shelves are looking kind of bare. If Russia cuts them off in the winter, and see, Russia doesn't have to really cut Europe off per se. It can, it may. But what Russia can do, and this is really bad, Russia can keep, and I think this is what we may see, keep just enough gas, just enough energy flowing into the EU, just enough that the EU can barely survive. You know what I mean? Just enough they can barely make it, but not enough that they can thrive, not enough that they can break even. And meanwhile, what does that do? That keeps the price through the roof because there's scarcity. So Russia creates artificial scarcity. against its adversaries, people that are trying to destroy its economy. Why wouldn't you? If you're trying to destroy my economy, why wouldn't I do the same to you? Not only that, Russia sells a lot of stuff to Europe. So what do they want to do? They want to keep Europe's economy alive, China too, because those are good customers, and we want to keep their economy alive so they can buy stuff from them. But if they ain't buying stuff from Russia, then what impetus does Russia have to throw a life preserver to the European economy? None. They can throw them an anchor and say, here, hug this. Go to, call me from the bottom of the sea and tell me how that worked out. So that's the title of my video. The Europeans are going to find out why some countries are rich and why some countries are poor. And in this day and age, in the day of industrialization, in the days of financialization, when countries are poor, oftentimes it's because of decisions that are made. And oftentimes the US empire will do one of two things. It will turn its back as oligarchs and criminal types rob a country blind, because they will work, let's say the US says, okay, you guys are robbing that country blind. Yeah, but you got uranium. Can we buy uranium from you at a cheap price? Sure, all you want. Then we'll not just turn our back on the corruption you're doing, but we'll help to keep you in office. We'll help to keep you in power so that we can continue to get this uranium, and you can do whatever you want with the rest of the country and impoverish and torture the people. And we'll give you all the support you need to do that, because we need that uranium. That's what the US is doing. And now, it's not Mali. It's not, Bolivia. It's now France and Italy and Europe. And so I guess the question people are holding their breath on is that as these lessons start to become apparent and obvious, and the Europeans learn them and start to say, wait a minute, we're being had. What are they going to do? Because the other part of it is that the U.S. and its intelligence operations have created environments. They've mirrored the vassal states like themselves. The United States, you have two brainwashed cults masquerading as two political parties. Right? There's nothing in it for the working class. There's nothing in it for nothing in it for you. Trust me, nothing. You get nothing out of this. You get no say, nothing. So now they've created that in Europe. Look at, what do you have? Basically, country after country, what the U.S. intelligence community has done through in a number of ways, that's a whole nother video, is created an environment where you got Liz Truss and Bojo in one party and Keir Starmer in the other party. And tell me what the difference between the two parties are. What are they going to pursue any different? Nothing. So they've created an environment where the people in Europe don't have an option. So they will be impoverished as a result of U.S. policy, as a result of the people who run their country, the political class, the ruling elite adhering to U.S. policy. And if they try to replace them with the other party, they're going to have other people who agree and will do the same thing. So the question is, will there be some kind of a revolution or some revolutionary activity, whatever, in the EU as they start to learn? I'm not advocating for it. I oppose violence. I hope nobody ever gets hurt. I hope that the people of Europe find a way to use democratic means to bring about a better life for them and to bring about peace and a better life for them and themselves. Whether that'll work, I don't know how it's going to happen, but that would be my hope. But I do believe that the people in Europe are going to be, within the next 6 months, waking up. Now, they're going to wake up real cold and they're going to wake up hungry. But are they going to wake up and say, no more, we're going to make peace with Russia, we're going to make peace with China? We're not. We will see. They won't, not under the current political leadership that they have. No, they will get poorer and poorer. They will suffer. And as that happens, eventually it'll explode, and Europe will become a very violent place and a very dangerous place to be. So anyway, that's my thoughts. I do have some super chats, so we're going to check the super chats. Wow, we got some super chats today, and we got one or two people over on Rockfin. Oh, no tips on Rockfin, but that's okay. I love my Rockfin friends. All right, super chats. So let's start with Lumpia Logic. Thank you for supporting Caleb Mop, and you're a real one. Thank you. I do support Caleb. I think they tried to take him out, man. I think the intelligence. That the brother Caleb. Okay, let's go. Good old Sparky. My brother knew Ambassador Stevens. He was pro-Africa, was all about Pan-Africa and an African currency. That's why the U.S. didn't rescue him. Interesting. You know what? that whole thing was about, and that is that compound in Libya is what they were using, that compound to run weapons to Syria for the dirty war in Syria, Operation Timber Sycamore. It was used. So in reality, that whole incident, a lot of people got it wrong. They didn't understand that it was really about Syria. Okay, Sparky says, wouldn't Blinken do better if he adopted a condescending white man's burden attitude when conducting diplomacy with the global South? He has tried. Very funny there, Sparky. And yeah, he kind of tried that to the globe, to the African countries, and they basically told him, get the hell out of here, dude. We're down with that. We're Russia. That is what it is. Sparky says, instead of setting a corrupt example, Putin will inspire the global South to be economically righteous to their citizens and their partner countries. I would agree with that. It's funny when you listen to people in the U.S. Well, even well-meaning people. Well, Putin is a dictator. I'm like, he's got 83% approval rating. How's he a dictator? A dictator with that kind of approval rating? A dictator in a country where the people support him, they support what he's doing, they love him, they got pictures of him all over the place. This is a dictator. Well, if he is a dictator, he sure is a dictator of the people in the country. And are you a dictator if the people in the country like what you're doing and want you to do it? Isn't like that almost by definition not a dictator? The people in your country like what you're doing and want you to continue it. And you're a dictator? It doesn't seem to add up to me. Let's keep going. Oh, we got more. Top JJ says, thanks, Garland. Thank you very much. I certainly appreciate that, Top JJ. Any more super chats? I don't see any. Did I miss one? Got that one already. I think that's it. And oh my gosh, we got new tips, but that's okay. USA is just a tool of the City of London Central Bank British Empire I'm going to read this. Being systematically bankrupted, fronting for the British Empire wars. The second after breakfast is complete, there's a new war on the continent, and Taiwan is just an extension of the Opium Wars, managed by the CFR, of course. Well, thanks a lot, Dicko and Rockfin. That's awesome. So there's a lot of people. Is Garland flat yet? Okay, I'm flat, whatever that means. I am flat. Anymore? No, that's it. Thanks, Garland and friends. Thanks a lot, comma. Oh, it's Kamala Harris. Thanks. Putin is the anti-corruption czar. The enemy is inside the gates. Have mercy on us, please, Garland, UK. We're also victims of neocon madness. Oh, there's no, exactly. I'm glad you said that. Nobody take this to mean that I got anything against Europeans. I believe that the people of Europe are victims. They're victims of the U.S. empire. They're victims of the neocon, and they're victims of the vassals and the crooks and corrupt leaders of their country. They are victims. Their lifestyle, everything they've worked their entire life for, is being thrown out the window by these lowlifes. So as far as I'm concerned, the people of Europe are victims in the same way that the people in Africa and South America and so many places have been victims of the colonialism, right? Now, the European people, the average everyday working class European, is now a victim of U.S. colonialism. They're now getting what their countries, not them, because those people weren't even benefiting from a normal colonialism, but they're getting what their countries have been doing to people for so many centuries. Now, unfortunately, the people from Europe, the everyday working class, is going to feel the kind of pain, because now those colonial powers are doing it to their own people. They're preying on their own. It's a sad state of affairs. Oh, well, thanks a lot, everybody. A couple of things real quick. And that is, I want to thank everybody for watching this. But if you're watching me on, oh, wait a minute. Whoa, let me look over here. We got a whole bunch of tips going. We got some tips going before I go. TD said, thank you, Garland. Dave Carlton says, super appreciate what you do. New fan of the Critical Hour. Thank you. Thanks. I really enjoy it. Garland, you're the best. Keep the truth coming. Let me see. Oh man, TD, thanks for the big tip. Thank you very much. Thanks TD. That was great. And And Dave Carlson, thanks a lot on Rockfin. That's really appreciate it. So what I was going to say is that everyone. Oh, wait a minute. Looks like we got another super chat. Times are a changing. Emery Chen says, reference approval ratings. Some point to high Chinese and Russian approving ratings as evidence of dictatorships. The people are brainwashed, the average American would say. Well, the average American would call somebody else brainwashed. Somebody sitting around watching MSNBC and CNN and Fox all day are called, yes, the other people are brainwashed. Why? Well, let's see. China brought 800 million people out of poverty, and believe it or not, the Chinese people like them and trust their government. Isn't that weird? And Russia was impoverished 20 years ago. It was an impoverished hellhole that had pretty much economically collapsed, maybe 25 years, 24 years ago. And now it's a very strong economic power and is the world power. So both of these countries 25 years ago weren't doing well, and now they're doing damn great. And it's shocked. People are shocked as to why the governments like them. So how about this? Let's do this, Emery Chen. Let's do it the other way. Some people point to high Chinese and Russian approval rating as evidence of dictatorship. The people are brainwashed. Here's what I'd say. The people are brainwashed in the US and the EU. You don't see the Russian leaders doing to their citizens what the leaders in the EU are doing to theirs. You don't see the Chinese people. The Chinese people are bringing 800 million people out of poverty. The EU leaders are putting 746 million, which is how many people are in the EU, into poverty. One country is taking their people out of poverty. One is putting people into poverty with deliberate attempts, with deliberate policies. So the reality is, I don't think it's the reality is, I don't think that it's the people in Russia and China that are brainwashed. I'll just put it like that. Yeah, there may be some brainwashed people around here, but I don't think it's the Russians and Chinese. All right, everyone, if you're watching this on Twitter, if you're watching this on Facebook, whatever the case, here's what I ask you to do me a favor. Go to my Rockfin, Rokfin. You'll see it at the bottom, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. And please become a member. Become a subscriber. You can become a member for $9.99 a month. I would appreciate it. It really helps the channel. Anybody that can become a Rockfin member, I ask every day, please do it. Additionally, I've got PayPal, garlandin@gmail.com, buymeacoffee.com. You can see it right below there. Buymeacoffee.com/garlandin. There's an H at the end. And certainly we've got Patreon. So anyone and on Rockfin, remember on Rockfin, anytime you watch on Rockfin, you can leave a tip if you want. So I appreciate all the people that do all the things they can to help keep this channel going. I certainly appreciate it. And I will be seeing you again tomorrow. Peace. I'm out.